Is it possible that everything you know about history is wrong? What if almost 300 years of documented world history didn't happen at all? Well, some believe that this is exactly the case. And if they're right, we don't live in the year 2025, but instead somewhere around the year 1700, so what makes them think this way? Let's take a look. This unusual idea is called the phantom time hypothesis. It was created by a German historian named Heribert Illingworth, who claimed that from 614 to 911 AD, nearly 3 centuries were lost. He began his research in the late 1980s and started questioning things he had learned while studying history. One of the things that stood out for him was how people in the Middle Ages referred to themselves as living in the 17th century. And since the beginning of the Middle Ages was in the year 476 AD, when the Western Roman Empire fell, he concluded that people back then were actually referring to the years since the fall of Constantinople, which happened in 1453. According to Illich, this could only mean one thing. Before the year 614 AD, there was no year 0. Instead, time began with the birth of Jesus Christ. This would mean that the year 01 BC was actually the year 1 and the year 01 AD was actually the year 2. In other words, our calendar is off by 1. He didn't stop there though. He also believed that there were entire centuries missing from human history. But why does he think this? To understand his theory, we have to take a closer look at how we count time. For centuries, time has been counted in a linear fashion where every year is numbered after the last. Each year is unique and different from all the others. This means that each moment in history is unique too. However, this isn't necessarily true. After all, is the year 2024 really that different from the year 2023? Or how about the year 1992 compared to 1993? As you can see, time doesn't always move forward in a linear motion. Sometimes it moves backward and repeats itself. Illingworth used this concept to come up with his theory. He looked at the Middle Ages as a time of repetitiveness and continuity, and he noticed that people back then referred to events that happened before their own lifetime as ancient history. For example, someone who lived between 750 and 850 AD might have referred to the events of the year 600 AD as ancient history. The reason he says that there are 3 centuries missing from history is because he believes that the years between 614 and 911 AD weren't really that different from each other. Back then, Europe was going through major political changes with new kingdoms rising and old ones falling. But apart from that, life continued much like it did before. There wasn't any significant technological advancement or any dramatic change to the lives of common people. So he decided to group these 3 centuries together into one big century. But why would he claim that the years 614 to 911 AD never happened at all? Well, his reasoning was that if we took the years 614 to 911 AD and added them to the year 1453, it would make more sense. We have to remember that Illich believed that people in the Middle Ages counted time differently than we do today. They believed that time began with the fall of Constantinople in 1453. If this is true, then the person who witnessed the fall of Constantinople would be an elderly man by the time the year 1000 rolled around. This meant that the events that took place between 614 and 911 AD happened in the distant past, long before his own lifetime. Therefore, he would consider them ancient history. But if we took those years and added them to 1453, they would fit nicely within his own lifetime. In other words, the years 614 to 911 AD would be considered contemporary history instead of ancient history. Another interesting point is that the birth year of Jesus Christ is unknown. Historians estimate it to be somewhere between 07 BC and 04 BC, but we don't know for sure. And if we're not certain about the year Jesus was born, then it's impossible to say for sure when the year 01 BC became the year 1. So perhaps time didn't start with the year 01 BC, but instead with the fall of Constantinople in 1453. That's what Illingsworth believed. But that's not all. He also claimed that there were historical records from the years between 614 and 911 AD that were written hundreds of years later. This is based on the fact that during the Middle Ages, books were expensive and rare. When someone important died, monks would often write down details about their life. These writings would then be copied and distributed throughout the kingdom, but this practice wasn't very reliable. Oftentimes, monks would forget certain details, and other times they would simply make mistakes. This led to a lot of confusion and ultimately a lot of misinformation. Illingworth believed that the years between 614 and 911 AD were particularly troublesome. During this time, Europe was being invaded by Slavic tribes from the east. These tribes were pagan and didn't believe in Christianity. This caused a bit of a problem for the monks who were trying to write down the history of the time. Since there was no official record of these events, monks would often make up stories about why certain places had Slavic names. For example, the city of Toledo was founded by the Visigoths, but over time its name changed to Toledo. In order to explain this name change, monks came up with a story saying that a king named Theodemir founded the city. The same thing happened with the city of Dresden. Its original name was Dransfeld, but over time it changed to Dresden. And again, monks made up a story to explain the name change. This time they said that the city was founded by a Frankish duke named Drasko. But here's where things get interesting. Both Theodemir and Drasko are names from the Slavic language. It seems that instead of explaining how Slavic tribes changed the name of cities and regions, monks tried to make up stories that were consistent with Christian teachings. This, according to Illingsworth, proves that the years between 614 and 911 AD never happened. If these stories are true, then the events that supposedly happened during those years must have been made up by the monks. This could mean that entire centuries' worth of history is nothing but a lie. But is he right? Unfortunately, we may never know for sure. But there are a few things we can say for sure. First, time doesn't always move in a linear fashion. Sometimes it moves backward and repeats itself. And second, monks during the Middle Ages often made mistakes while writing down historical records. This led to a lot of confusion and ultimately a lot of misinformation. But this doesn't necessarily mean that the years between 614 and 911 AD never happened. There are still many historians who believe that Illich's theory is incorrect. They say that there is plenty of evidence that shows these years did exist. For example, there are official documents from the Byzantine Empire that mention events that took place during these years. In addition, there are archaeological findings that also support this timeline. So, although we may never know for sure whether the years between 614 and 911 AD never happened, one thing is for sure. Time is a funny thing. It can be linear or cyclical depending on how you look at it. It can also be a source of confusion and misinformation. But no matter how you look at it, it's a reminder that we should always be critical of the information we're presented with. So, what do you think? Do you think the years between 614 and 911 AD ever happened? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out my other content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.